Good morning, everyone. It's 5:30 in the morning, and I'm just chilling here. Look at that. This is one of my favorite trees. I love this tree. Look at that tree. Here's some chunks of wood and stuff I found on the ground. This is the fire hydrant. The fire hydrant. See? This is for when COVID was a thing. This is the secret spot I come to smoke. I can't show you it because it's secret. This. This is the morning sun on my face. Good morning, Ra. Good morning, Ra, the sun god. Namaste, Ra. Yahuda Kristala Yod Havahu. Look at the morning sun on my face. Look at the colors. Look at the colors. Wow. Oh, I just woke up. It's 5:30 in the morning. Nobody's awake. I want a cup of coffee and everybody's asleep. So I'm just giving you a tour of where I live. This is how you square the circle in terms of the Vitruvian Man. I'm gonna get some flowers. I'm gonna get some flowers for my altar. Four, two, zero.
Is there a scientific solution that can unite all areas of science so they may be understood holistically rather than as separate compartmentalized forces? In
a whole different set of understanding that describe the small stuff. Yet the universe is one thing, and the small stuff makes up the big stuff. So there must be a unified understanding of physics out there. In ancient knowledge, in ancient civilization, in ancient wisdom, there was that unified view. It was usually in most of these civilizations gathered around one simple principle. A principle that said that at the base of creation there is a fundamental energy. They called it chi, they called it prana, the Egyptian called it ka, and it was the source of all creation. It was at the base of all the physics we observe and the forces. Nothing could happen without that energy. The problem there
Car.
is that we start to divide all the science into pieces, smaller and smaller pieces, so that scientists could have a very high focus on, one little piece of the puzzle. And what happens when we do that is we lose the global view, we lose the holistic view of the system. We lose uh, the connection between all of the pieces of the puzzle. We don't necessarily understand how cosmology affects biology, how quantum theory affects awareness or consciousness. So everything becomes discontinuous. We've lost the ability to have a unified view of the mechanics of our universe, never mind a unified view of our existence in it or even of our relationship with each other. We can do something over here and it's not affecting anything over there because they're not related. When we see, in fact, in natural system that everything seems to be interrelated and interconnected. So, in order to unify physics, we must find what is the point of unification. And that's where ancient civilization had this link between the two, had this fundamental understanding of unification of the forces of nature. And it came from this fundamental view that space-time is a energy that connects everything. Think of space as being full instead of empty. And think of the stuff in space as being part of this fullness of space. Not something separate, but something that emerged from this energy in space. In modern physics, we have all these principles, these forces, for instance, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, the weak force. But at the base of modern physics, there is nothing that explains where these forces come from. For instance, we have no physics to describe the origin of even the Big Bang, the emergence of our universe, the emergence of space-time. Never mind what is the structure of space-time made of. To me,
Well,
this
I
was a
do.
big hole in our understanding. It's like
Called
we
theoretical
modern
physics.
physics in mid-air without a foundation, without knowing what's producing all this. And when we try to solve quantum equations for the field at the very, very fine level of the structure of space, we found that there was almost infinite amount of energy there. And we called it vacuum fluctuations. So it's a little deceiving because when you think vacuum, you're thinking empty. You're not thinking full.
What science has found is large number, 10 to the 93 grams per centimeter cubed. The vacuum density, better known as the Planck density at the quantum scale, is enormous. 10 to the 93 grams per centimeter cubed is more than if we took all the stars in the universe, all the galaxies combined, and compressed them down to 1 centimeter cubed. Imagine how energetic that would be.
Well, that's still 30 orders or 39 orders of magnitude less dense than the density of the energy of the electromagnetic fluctuation at the state of the vacuum in the quantum world. Well, imagine if I looked at all of the frequencies, all of the wavelengths of all the electromagnetic field in the space, in the field between us, and I tried to analyze where does it stop? How short then can the wavelength get, right? Well, when I add all this up in quantum field theory, I get almost an infinite amount of energy fluctuation in the space. You could think of that energy as a fundamental source of creation. In certain words, in certain tradition, it could be called God. It has all the same attributes. If you ask someone, what would you describe God as? Typically, they'll say omniscient, omnipotent. It's everywhere. It knows everything. It's the creating power of everything, right? If
Tree of
this
life.
energy is there and it's truly the source of the material world, then it could be described as the God force, right? Or the energy that creates all of the world, all of creation. The only difference, and this is an important distinction, is that the fluctuation, the energy of this energy, is actually the result of all things in the universe interacting with each other. It's not coming from somewhere else. It is the source of everything interacting with each other from infinitely big to infinitely small. It's a continuum of interaction. The whole thing is one thing. There's not matter here and space here. There is this fundamental energy in various dynamics of it producing the effects that we see as gravity, as matter, as electromagnetism, as electricity, and so on. And so now we start to get a unified view of this fundamental concept. When we analyze a system,
Fuck you, thermodynamics.
And then I assume this to be a closed system, and I say, oh, I have missed one part of the equation. And if I open the box, I take the system out of isolation, and I open the box, I realize that the water continues to go down the river. And because the sun is shining and the earth is spinning, the water is being evaporated, and then it's raining down or snowing down, and it's flowing back into my lake. And now I realize there's a continuous energy exchange where I am only looking, if I only look at the turbine, at my little device in that greater dynamics of the flow of creation.
Another way to understand the interrelationship of highly ordered systems is to examine the concept of ether.
Typically, when we talk about ether in modern physics, people are
Ka, ether, wuji, prana, chi, akasha, zest. Vigor, zeos, zeal, zeos. That's the Greek word for zeal. Zeos, zeal.
this ancient concept of an ether that has fluid dynamics, and it's used by Newton to describe gravity, and eventually James Clerk Maxwell to describe the electromagnetic field, Maxwell's equation, that was discarded by the Michelson and Marley experiments, and that has no validity anymore. There is a problem in this way this experiment was done. That is, an interferometer with the precision that was able to achieve at the time would not
Bioelectromagnetic field. Phototherapy people.
scale where we describe this vacuum fluctuation occurring. This is a scale that's billions and billions and billions of times smaller than an atom.
May I recommend the Y-Age range and of course the X39 patch from LifeWave if you are looking for a non-thermal. Yeah, a non-thermal. I want to say non-transdermal, but it is thermal. Wait, never mind. I need to do a better at take two. Are you looking to stimulate the stem cells inside your body, the natural stem cells that you have? may I recommend the X39 patch or the Y-Age Aeon range for energy and sleep from LifeWave, recommended by trusted doctors of the Golding Institute, in addition to Dr. Coral Pitt von Eden. Please, please purchase a box of 30 patches that you can place on your meridians to enhance your bioelectromagnetic field and make you live longer. You want to live longer? I know a guy. Let's all live longer together. Thank you, Asclepios, for healing. And thank God for take 2. Maybe we'll do a third take later. Cheers.
Drag of this ether should be measurable as the Earth moves through it. Think of frame dragging. Frame dragging is an effect upon space-time, predicted by Einstein's general theory of relativity.
Link in the description.
Stationary distributions of mass energy. A stationary field is one that is in a steady state, but the masses causing that field may be non-static or rotating, for instance.
But imagine that if the drags of these frames is very, very, very fine near the surface, it would be very difficult to detect. Now, do we know that the frames are dragging, as in space-time dragging behind the planet? We do. We measured it now. But we didn't measure it with an interferometer on the surface of the planet like Marcus and Marley. We measured it with a laser, being emitted from the surface of the planet to a satellite in orbit, so that there would be enough distance that we could measure the frame dragging. And because the ether was removed and space-time was introduced, and then space-time predicted frame dragging, and we measured the frame dragging, but the frame dragging measurements was never reunified with the concept of the ether. So people in physics, when they talk about ether, they think of this thing that is ancient and that we don't use anymore in physics. But in fact, we both have vacuum fluctuation at the quantum level in physics that act very much like an ether, and we have measured the frame dragging of space-time, which would be the drag of the ether. So just to be clear, frame dragging that has been measured in space-time, frame dragging of space-time, may be actually the drag of the ether that we are measuring. In the space, right? And then they talk about ether, and they might even talk about gravity being the curvature of space. I believe, from what we found, that actually all these things are the same thing, right? When we look at matter, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at 99.999999999% space, right? So space and matter about to publish a whole new set of equations that are expansion from earlier equations that I wrote that solves all this, gives the correct values for masses, for charge, for um, for gravity, for all the things we see in the universe, including galaxies, clusters, stars, universes, and temperatures. And so it's unified. We have solved this and we're about to publish it, but as well, the center part has been solved, showing that there's no differences between these things. You cannot get mass without space, and you can't get space curving without mass, and you can't get mass and space without electromagnetic fields, and that they're all connected through this dynamic structure of the quantum vacuum fluctuation. So to understand some of the intricacies that were developed in the beginning of quantum physics and the misconception that emerged as a result of the loss of this fundamental energy in the space, this ether. One of the best examples is the Copenhagen interpretation of the double slit experiment.
The Copenhagen interpretation was
Of the
first
double
posed by
slit
physicists
experiment,
Niels
wave
Bohr.
particle duality.
It says that a quantum particle
Listen, photons. Photons can exist in both a particle and wave state. Quantum particles, Plancks, whatever you want to call them, they exist in both a wave and particle state until observed. The double slit experiment. I love the double slit experiment. And who doesn't like two slits?
particle doesn't exist in one state or another, but in all of its possible states at once. It's only when we observe its state that a quantum particle is essentially forced to choose one probability, and that's the state that we observe. Since it may be forced into different observable states each time, this explains why a quantum particle behaves erratically.
So we were shooting particles at the slit, and we got one result on the backboard where the particles were being recorded. And we put two slits, and we got a different result. All of a sudden, instead of particles,
act
it
of
appeared
observation.
like waves. And then we tried to put the instrument there to try to figure out where was happening with the particles that was making those results, and then we got a third result. And so, all of a sudden there's confusion, and because it was thought that all of a sudden we don't know if a particle can be a particle or a wave, and when they're measured, it changes them. And so, it was like all this seems so unusual. And certainly, with the loss of the concept of the ether, it was not easy to explain. Well, there's another way to interpret the double slit experiment. The fact that if you shoot one particle at the slit,
Ads.
backboard as if it's particle. And if you put two slits, it makes wave interaction on the backboard as if it was a wave all of a sudden, is most likely because when you move a particle in a field that acts like a fluid, you're making waves. So of course the particles appears to be a particle and a wave. This is thought to be a theory that was developed by a great French physicist, Louis de Broglie, that worked with Bohm as well, and that Bohm brought forward as well later on. And de Broglie said, well, this can be described.
I never thought to look at a Lemurian quartz crystal with my third eye before, but I'm going to do that right now. I have to open up my third eye. Just give me a second. In order to do this, I have to name the crystal so I have something to focus on. That's why we have language. Anyway, what we're gonna name my crystal. I'll name both my crystals. My crystal's name is Lemurian 1. So I'm gonna focus on Lemurian 1. Your name. Your name. Your name is Lemurian 1. I dub you Lemurian 1. You are now Lemurian 1. I drop you. I knight you. Rise as Lemurian 1. Okay. Let it be known that I got the colors of my aura in addition to one other very interesting color. I'm gonna name this one Lemurian Dos. For 2, this is Lemurian Dos. I put you down. I lay you down. Boop. Boop. I lift you up. You are Lemurian Dos. Lemurian Dos. This little chunk that fell off Lemurian 1, I'm gonna name Pipper. This is Pipper. Hello, Pipper. Let's name it Pipper.